Hi. I'm curious about when we're born, it seems that the babies have their personality already. Does that personality carry forward from lifetime to lifetime?
It really does in this sense. You are who you are, and who you are is expressing into the point in time in which you are focused. And who you are is responding to what's happening around you. So there are many people, it has been an age-old battle of how much of who you are is really who you are and how much of it is influenced by your environment. And we say both happen because who you are is who you are and who you are is responding to the environment. But the key factor that we would like you to consider more than all other things put together is that the personality characteristics that you see and describe in lots of different ways are more about the factor of how well connected this person is to who they really are in the moment or how distant from that connection they are. Mm-hmm. In other words, the real personality differences that happen to you in these physical bodies have to do with that one factor. How much am I allowing who I really am to be here in this moment, and how much have I pinched it off? So there could be this pure non-physical energy, and all of it is as it comes forth into these little baby human bodies. So here you come, pure positive energy, right away observing the environment around you. And let's say the conditions that you observe are things that feel out of your control. You're little and all of them are big. And even though pure positive energy is who you really are, and you keep emitting this pure positive energy, the way people respond to you in time begins to evoke response back from you. Now, the good news is that with each response that you offer back, you're getting guidance from your emotions that lets you know whether you're getting further or closer to who you really are. In other words, that guidance system is there. And if there is anything that has caused confusion and distortion among humans and makes it hard for them to acknowledge what their guidance is telling them, it is the distortion that has happened gradually, but many are adhering to in a very forceful way, that says if it feels good, it probably isn't, and if it feels bad, it's probably good. In other words, there has become such a distortion of all of that as people have, little by little, there has been an erosion of inner guidance and an explosion of outer guidance. In other words, so many people seeking to influence you and control you and wanting to give you all of the rules and encouraging you not to pay any attention to the way you feel has caused more people to get further from who they really are. Who you are and the personality that is you as you come forth is always optimistic and always expecting life to be good and always wanting to be of value and always expecting that you are of value. You are passionate, loving, adoring, adorable beings coming forth. And to the degree that you do not reflect that is a distortion of your true personality. So when humans use the term personality, usually they are talking about such distortion right from the beginning. In other words, someone who describes a child as an ornery child is not seeing the true personality of that child. And so the expression personality is really speaking about the connection or disconnection much more than anyone knows.
We have a nephew that some believe have autism. Is that who he is and that's how he wants to live? Or is that picked up from vibrations around him?
Well, that's who he is and who he wants to be. And he has come forth deliberately beating that drum from his non-physical perspective because he is wanting to have a perspective of physical experience that cannot be distorted and controlled by others. In other words, this is an intense personality that says, I will go forth and hold my own perspective and I will not easily be persuaded by the perspectives of others.
So what is the best advice to the parents to support this boy.
Our encouragement to all of you, whether you are dealing with people that you don't know very well or whether you're dealing with people that you know very well, like children or parents or siblings or even co-workers, is to decide that you're going to be an encourager. Decide that you're not going to evaluate where someone is based upon your standard of life, but you're going to let them be where they are and watch for their improvement from their standard of life. And when you let their improvement from their standard of life be what matters most to you, then, first of all, they'll start listening to you a little more. You can leave out of the equation as you are mentoring them where you are and what your standards are, and instead you're just trying to help them feel a little bit better. It's a whole different game, you see. Mm-hmm. So how is this personality expressing itself?
He doesn't talk much, and he's not very social. He's more to himself. He's destructive.
All right, so let's think about this. He stays to himself, and in light of what we've been talking about, it's easy to feel why he might do that, because he doesn't really understand where others are. He can't really relate to it. When he tries to, he feels their disappointment or their disapproval, so he withdraws to what feels best to him. So isn't that sort of a good thing? And right. But many would say, oh, withdrawal is not a good thing. We've got to bring him out. But when you think about it in light of what we've been talking about, don't you want to pat him on the back and say, oh, your self-survival instincts are working pretty well. You've withdrawn because it feels better to withdraw. And so understanding that, you would say, good job. Whether you say it openly or not, you would feel, good job. I see why you do this. And this is a good choice that you make. And so then you say, he's not very social. Well, same thing all over again. He's not very social because when he tries to socialize or when he tries to integrate, everybody wants him to integrate by their standards. But when you're understanding that he's just trying to get from where he is to a little better place, you're not trying to make the children that live in Haiti understand the lifestyle that you live in Manhattan. In other words, they don't relate. They're not going to get it. And you're not going to make them happier by showing them pictures of what it's like to live in Manhattan. In other words, it's too big of a jump. It never works. And so you've got to get close to where he is if you're going to mentor. But most importantly, you've got to not feel criticism about where he is. Where he is has to be okay. And that's the thing we so much wanted to give you when you were asking about these personalities. Yes, he chose that. He chose that from his non-physical perspective. How okay is that? That's got to be the ultimate okay. In other words, this is who he chose to be. This is who he is. This isn't who he accidentally is. This isn't who he freakishly is. This isn't who he is in his broken condition. This is who he is, and who he is fine. You don't bash in the glass on your gas gauge because it reads empty. Well, there are those who would criticize you for the color of your skin. In other words, there are those who do not understand and who would ask you to be something different than you are, although those things are changing. But, it is so wonderful to be on either end of a relationship where you are just accepting them as they are. And you are letting the standard for your mentoring be based upon what they want in terms of improvement, not what you want in terms of improvement. So, what might you say to the parents? This is not a defective child. What you might say to the parents is, this person, just like any of us that are born with different characteristics, is born with these characteristics. And our goal as those who love this person is to guide gently into the feeling better that this one can find. Well, we think there's some anger there, but think about what we've been talking about. As you think about this child, can you see how there could be a case where anger might be a good choice for him?
Yes.
So could you convey to his parents that rather than condemning the anger, which certainly makes their life less comfortable, that in his anger he might be making his own life more comfortable? And do you think you can see, and then maybe help them to see, that if you cannot condemn his anger, but instead feel relief that he's getting some relief through his anger, that now you might be able to bridge him someplace else? So here's this child who is who he is, being who he is, being all that he can be, and not being enough for those who love him and wanted something different. And so as he bumps up against that vibration and feels his not enoughness, can you feel how bad that feels?
Yes.
And can you feel how his anger is an improved feeling? That he feels better in the anger than he does in the other feeling? And can you feel how, if you could encourage him in his anger, or at least not discourage him, if you could accept him in his anger and just gently try to guide him past the anger into frustration rather than trying to bring him over here into perfection, that he might have a prayer of moving from that destructive, angry behavior into something that is less angry and less destructive, but how by condemning the behavior just puts him right back in that lost place. Oh, what a wonderful teacher has come forth here.
Thank you.
Did you get that? In fact, didn't this autistic child help you to get it better than you got it all day? In other words, isn't it easier to get that? It's so easy to get that. And you're willing to give this child the benefit of the doubt. Why not give yourself the benefit of the doubt in the same way? In other words, you are all lovely, loving beings who want to love. And when you don't love, some of you just take it way too hard. In other words, it's so hard not to be the perfect beings you want to be. And we want you to not feel uncomfortable about not being the perfect beings you want to be, because we are all constantly evolving into something more, you see. You got to give yourself a break, and you got to give everybody else a break too. You got to stop worrying about where people are. Don't worry so much about where you are, and instead keep your eye on where you'd like to be, and just go gently there. Don't have a fit in humor.
I have to tell you, back in high school, I totally lived the law of attraction and deliberate creation. Then I went to college and got tainted by the world, and I have been wanting for a very long time to get back into that. And I am so grateful for you to be here. But I have to tell you that I, at times, feel like I'm not even here. I've experienced it quite a few times today already, even when you were talking about death and how we're spirits. And is that meaning that I'm connecting
It is.
completely?
As you make the comparison between how you felt in high school when it felt like you were powerful and like you just softly turn your attention towards something and the universe would yield it to you. That's the way it is supposed to feel. In other words, you knew that when you came forth, that this is an environment that causes you to focus, and when you focus, the preference will just draw life through you, and if you don't do something that keeps it from happening, it unfolds. But then the real world sort of sets in, where there are so many people that are saying, no, come this way, no, you should do this, no, you should do that, and then you end up in a sort of state of confusion where you hinder your own ability to allow good things to come to you. We think that it will be very easy for you to slip back into that place of knowing and expecting, because you can remember it viscerally. In other words, you remember how it feels. And we think that what you've heard from us here today will put you in the place of recognizing where you are. We want, and it is our belief that you have achieved it here as we've been chewing here today. We want you to recognize that you are never in a wrong place. We're not really proponents of blaming the world, but we certainly encourage you to do it in the way that you just did it, because what you're saying is, under better conditions, I was able to maintain my balance. But under worse conditions, I was not able to maintain my balance. And what we want you to leave this gathering saying is, under all conditions, I can maintain my balance. And sure, it's easier to feel good when someone's adoring me. And sure, it's easy to feel good when I have something beautiful to look at. But I can shift my gaze because I have the power to focus. And I can therefore make myself feel any way I choose to feel if it matters enough. And I'm happy that I had that youthful experience where everything was going my way. And I'm happy that I have diverged from that a little bit, because now I know where I want to be and where I'm going. In other words, my path is clearly charted by me. I know that I want to be in concert with my own vibration. I know I want to be aware of how I'm feeling. I know I want to embrace my emotions, and I love knowing when I've got my hand on the hot stove. And I love knowing by the depth of my emotion what my vibrational content is. And I love knowing that I can change a thought and therefore shift that feeling. I love the feeling of empowerment that comes by knowing that I can feel any way I choose to feel. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity to practice that, you see. Many people would say, I want the conditions to line up so that I can have good feeling responses to the conditions. But we don't think that those of you who are here today are so much among those now. we can feel you saying something that is much more powerful. I don't need conditions to line up in any particular way, because I have the ability to choose what I focus upon, and therefore choose the way I feel, and therefore choose my point of attraction, and then law of attraction will line up the circumstances around me. I've discovered that I don't have to find something that feels good in order to create something that is good. I can find a reason to feel good, and in finding the reason to feel good, I will offer a vibration, and then everything gathers around me. I am my own point of attraction. It is such a lovely thing to know.